Hey, what's up you guys? You're watching Team APS, Paul here, and in today's video we're going to talk about evenly matched, or rather budget alternatives to evenly matched. Because as we all know, this card is very powerful, very popular, but it's also very expensive. And we also know that mass removal is extremely powerful and kind of necessary in Yu-Gi-Oh! Today. There are loads of big fields of really difficult to deal with monsters. Spiral Sleeper, especially when it's equipped with Last Resort, or has Spiral Resort out. We've also got things like, ABC Dragon Buster, Baguska. So yeah, being able to get rid of your opponent's board is pretty much paramount to being able to play and fight back. So even though expensive cards are usually the best cards, there are some budget alternatives, so let's hop right into them. So first we have the basic, just vanilla removal cards. That's Raigeki, Dark Hole, and Interrupted Kaiju Slumber. So these are all at one, I guess for good reason. They can clear the field really easily. What I like about them is that they're just easy to play and profit. If your opponent has a big board of monsters, you can just boom Raigeki, boom Dark Hole, get rid of their stuff, and just push forward. You do have to be careful though, because as nice as these cards are, there are things like Spiral Last Resort, which can be protecting, a sleeper. There are things like Time Star Magician and Pendulum Magicians that can protect their field. And of course, stuff like Totally Awesome and like a deck like Paleozoics that can negate these cards really easily and then take them away from you to use later. So you do have to be careful. I think that these are the cards that come to mind like kind of initially for most people, and they are really strong. I suggest if you're not maybe main decking Raigeki to always be side decking it and Dark Hole, and if you're running Kaijus, which spoiler we'll get into here in a bit, then Interrupted Kaiju Slumber is also a really good option. The next set of cards are the Kaijus and a couple of others. So Kaijus are, very infamous in Yu-Gi-Oh! People have their opinions on them, but I think that these days they're a necessary evil for competing in the game right now. The benefit to Kaijus is that you're able to tribute your opponent's monsters completely regardless of any protection, any effects that they have. The monster literally leaves the field and then the Kaiju's there and that's it. The downside though is that you are giving your opponent a monster, and that's kind of a weakness. And the other two cards I'm going to talk about, Lava Golem and the Winged Dragon of Raw Sphere mode, both suffer from similar problems. With Kaijus, you can only get rid of one thing at a time, your opponent can only control one Kaiju, and yeah, you're still giving your opponent a Kaiju. Now that's generally worth it if you're going to be getting rid of like a Spiral Sleeper or an ABC Dragon Buster, because those are clearly bigger threats, but it is something to keep in mind. Lava Golem, to an even further degree, is giving your opponent a 3000 attack point beat stick. And it also has the weakness of, you can't normal summon the turn that you use it, so giving your opponent a Lava Golem, you have to kind of weigh it. And then last but not least, there is the Winged Dragon of Raw Sphere mode, which tributes a whopping 3 monsters from your opponent's side of the board, which is great for clearing out a huge troublesome field, and it even protects itself when it comes back to you. But the one weakness in that card is that your opponent has to have 3 monsters. So if they're in some situation where they only have 2 monsters, then your Winged Dragon of Raw Sphere mode is technically another dead card in your hand. And then bringing up the rear, we've got our usual trap suspects. Torrential Tribute and the Mirror Force cards. That could be Drowning Mirror Force, Storming Mirror Force, Quaking Mirror Force, doesn't really matter, kind of take your pick. But yeah, these cards are really good for punishing your opponent if they overextend. It's cool because you can hit them with these cards on their own turn, and that's pretty valuable, but these actually probably have the most weaknesses out of the bunch, mostly because they're traps, which means you do have to set them first, and that makes them really slow. That makes them susceptible to Cosmic Cyclone, Twin Twister, MST, all of those cards. And the biggest problem, I think, is that they can't answer established boards. So if your opponent already has all these big monsters in the field, then drawing, Torrential Tribute isn't necessarily going to help you a whole lot. So yeah, these cards can be a little bit predictable, they can be a little bit slow, but if you're looking for more mass removal, they do fill the job pretty nicely. And now we're going to talk about some spell and trap mass removal, because this is oftentimes forgotten. We've got Zaphion the Time Lord and Spell Shattering Arrow. So getting rid of spells and traps is pretty important these days. Pendulum Magicians run a lot of them, Spirals actually run a lot of them. So let's start with Zaphion. Zaphion can actually shuffle all of your opponent's spells and traps back into their deck. That's extremely valuable. It ensures that there's no floating spell and traps, and all those things with the Spyro rescue missions that can be used in the grave. They don't get any of that. Same for like Pendulum Magicians, they like to float when they're destroyed, but Zaphion just shuffles it all back in the deck. This is extremely valuable, but Zaphion's weakness is it takes up a normal summon, so you're not going to really be getting into your own strategy very much that turn. And it's a little bit slow. If you need to answer things immediately, then it's not really your guy. That's where Spell Shattering Arrow comes in, because Spell Shattering Arrow is a quick play spell, so that's extremely handy, and it just destroys all the face-up spells and traps in the field. Against Spirals, that can be useful against you know, Big Red, Last Resort, Spiral Resort, that one continuous mission card. Yeah, it can get rid of all of those, and it even burns your opponent for 500 in the process. It's also really helpful against Pendulum Magicians because you can get rid of their scales, you can get rid of Star Pendulum Graph, all in one go. Just be careful that you don't hit the wrong scales because all their magicians tend to float in some way or another, so there's something to keep in mind. So that concludes the video. Those are several, in my opinion, really great alternatives to Evenly Matched. Now, the obvious disclaimer, of course, is that Evenly Matched is expensive for a reason. These are alternatives. They're not gonna be as good as the real thing. It, you know, costs 60 bucks because it's a good card. But thankfully, there are some good cards we can use in its place. And I'd actually like to, know, like, what do you guys use for match removal and things like that? Let me know down in the comments. I'd love to hear it. Also, shoutouts to my friend Kelly Locke over at TCG Player. He actually wrote an article about these budget alternatives that inspired this video. Check out that article. I'll have it linked in the description. It does a much better job than me of actually explaining why these cards are good. So yeah, he's a great writer and you should definitely give that a read. All right, that's all. So remember, thumbs up if you like the video, subs if you love the video, hit the notification bell so you can know of all our new ones. And it's gonna be it. I'll see you guys in the next one.